Hey, it's Ethan. And before we get to the show, I just want to talk to you about your tiny house plans for 2022. If you're trying to do a tiny house this year, like really trying to do it, it's not all glossy photos and Instagram posts. The actual work of planning and building a tiny house is gritty, slow, and frustrating. And I know this because I built my own tiny house back in 2012, and I went over budget by about $15,000, and it took a year longer than I was expecting. Back when I built, there weren't many resources available. I was pretty much alone. There were no other tiny house builders around that I could ask questions to. There were no YouTube channels giving tours and showing how to install various tiny house appliances. And in terms of design, I didn't have many houses to see to inspire me. Figuring out how all the systems work together was a major headache, and I still live with some of the mistakes I made in my tiny house. So what I'm here to tell you is that you don't have to do this alone. I created an online community called Tiny House Engage with the exact purpose of connecting you with other tiny housers at every step in the process. The result is that you can build your house faster. You can learn from and be inspired by your peers who are already living tiny, and you can celebrate your successes and milestones and learn from other people's challenges and mistakes. If you've gotten to the point where you are serious about pursuing this lifestyle, even if you haven't drawn a single floor plan and you don't know what a heat pump is, that's okay. Tiny House Engage is for you. Registration is open this week only. So it opened on Tuesday, February 8th, and it goes through Tuesday, February 15th, and that is it for the month of February. You can learn more over at thetinyhouse.net/engage. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/engage, ENGAGE. And it doesn't matter if you've just started or you haven't even started at all. If you know you want to live tiny, then Tiny House Engage is the most supportive community to help you along on that journey. So join us today over at thetinyhouse.net/engage. I can't wait to see you in the community.
I actually got pulled over for the first time by a police officer, actually a state trooper, and he was doing commercial vehicle inspections. They're doing inspections on commercial vehicles, and I was like, oh, no, this is a RV conversion. I live in here.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and this is episode 200 with Nomad Brad. I'm really excited to share this conversation with Nomad Brad because I think that we all have a lot to learn from van lifers in the tiny house space. Brad has actually taken a old U-Haul truck, which again is something that not a lot of van lifers are doing, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and we'll get into why I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that Brad is doing some really unique things here. So there's a lot to learn, and I think it's an inspiring conversation that you will enjoy, whether you're interested in a tiny house on wheels, a van, a schoolie, etc. Well, I hope you stick around. I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Precision Temp. Precision Temp is making one problem to solve two issues that I know everyone deals with in a tiny house: running out of hot water and heating your tiny house or schoolie. Precision Temp has made the amazing Twin Temp Junior propane tankless water heater, which provides unlimited hot water for your tiny house and hydronic heating. This means you get warm, heated floors so there are no cold spots. It's designed specifically for tiny houses and features whisper quiet operation as well as high efficiency. If you want more information on how Precision Temp can help make tiny living easier and more comfortable, visit precisiontemp.com. While you're there, use the coupon code THLP for $100 off any Precision Temp unit plus free shipping. That website again is precisiontemp.com. Coupon code THLP for $100 off any Precision Temp unit plus free shipping. Thank you so much to Precision Temp for sponsoring our show. All right. right, I am here with Brad Thomas, aka Nomad Brad. Nomad Brad has spent the last 4 years living the van life. He has photographed the lush landscape of Washington's Olympic National Rainforest and camped under Arizona's breathtaking pastel sunsets. His plans were to get lost in nature, be of service to others, and drink green juice. He started out with nothing but a dream of reducing his possessions and finding more freedom. After self-converting his first van and hitting the road, Nomad Brad learned that experience was his best teacher. Many of the items he brought along in his first van were seldom used, and some of his most thought-out design features turned out to be completely unnecessary. After 4 years of living on the road, Brad is now helping others avoid the same, sometimes costly mistakes that he did. His mission is to help other free-thinking, nature-loving, adventurous souls navigate the van life experience. Nomad Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I always like talking to new faces.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And likewise, I've been totally just nerding out watching the tour that you did of your van, and it's a nice long video. I think it's over 30 minutes long, and you really go into a lot of details and kind of behind the scenes. So congrats on that one.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the video tour I did, as the person that built, I tend to go a little more in depth, and I feel like the people that watch my channel and my videos, they want to know all the nuts and bolts, like what materials I used and how I accomplished certain things.
Yep.
Versus like I did a tour for Tiny Home Tours, and they got some cool video, but they were also more interested in my story. And so, when I'm just touring my own van, I'm not like telling my story. So it's a different experience.
Right. Yeah, totally. So, I mean, there are so many cool features here, but I guess just starting out, your van that you're currently in is a former U-Haul, correct?
Yes, it is. It's a former U-Haul. This is the 12-foot box.
Okay. So that's the small one.
There's a 10, a 12, a 16, and a 32.
Okay.
So it is on the small side. It's not the smallest.
Wow. You wouldn't know that it's 12 when you look at the tour. It looks a lot more spacious than that.
It does, yeah. So when I built this one, I've been in a lot of friends' vehicles, and they have a lot of storage and cabinets, which allows you to bring a lot of things with you, but then it feels also more enclosed. And I really just wanted to have a feeling of a large space.
Yeah.
And so that's what I went for. I think I nailed it.
Yeah, it's like open floor plan.
Yeah, it is. It's open concept.
So could you talk a little bit about, I love in your bio that you talked about like your first build, some of your like, your darlings, your things that you sweated the most over ended up being totally superfluous or didn't work the way you expected. Can you tell us about some of those things that you kind of built out and then kind of nixed in the second rig?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, the hardest part is knowing what you're going to want or need before you've actually lived the lifestyle, right? So initially, I'm just trying to think of my current home in a sticks and bricks, and how do I transform that into a vehicle?
Yeah.
And so one thing I ended up with that a lot of other people, or that I saw in other videos, is an outdoor kitchen. So my first van, I actually redesigned it 3 different times in the year and a half I was living in it. But one of the initial concepts was I had a big kitchen in the back. So you'd open the back doors, and you had your sink and your cooktop and your fridge, and you had all your stuff there and a lot of space, and you could be outside and naturey. But I realized pretty quick that when you're living van life, there's a lot of times when you don't want to be outside cooking, right? And so like if it's rainy or if you're in the city, you don't want to be outside with the doors open, especially at night if it's cold, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And also, I could only access the fridge with the back doors open. So I realized pretty quickly that was a poor choice, at least for my lifestyle. I think if you're going to do part-time stuff or like weekend getaways or campgrounds, it's totally fine. But for like full-time living, I think you want to be able to do everything from inside the vehicle.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what are so was your first van a U-Haul as well, or was it a more, I guess I'm going to say traditional van, but I'm kind of laughing as that comes out of my mouth.
Yeah, it was a more traditional van. It was just a standard Econoline cargo van. So pretty standard, a lot smaller than this box
Yeah.
truck. And
Yeah.
so like for example, it was like a mid roof, so I couldn't quite stand up all the way. So like when I was cooking or doing whatever, I had to tilt my head to the side, or I had to spread my legs out super wide, and then I could like slouch down and do some cooking. So but I made it a year and a half, and I mean, I had some great memories, so I can't even really say that it was a negative.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that I've done some kind of short-term van experiments. My wife and I did a 2-week road trip, and we just flew out to the West Coast, rented a minivan from like the rental car company, and just kind of stuck a foam mattress in there. Had a pretty rudimentary little wardrobe and kitchen setup. Not being able to stand up is really a major quality of life down bummer, I would say.
You should have rented a U-Haul when you flew to the West Coast instead of a
Yeah,
minivan.
seriously. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I should have rented a U-Haul, though, having, I guess, an somewhat insulated and heatable cabin was nice, but your point is well taken.
Can I ask you what inspired you to make that journey? Because that's what I recommend to people is if they're thinking about van life, just try it out. Go rent a van and go camping for a week.
It was partially because of COVID. Really, this was in November, so kind of at the peak of one of the peaks of COVID, and my wife had just graduated from grad school and had been dreaming of doing some traveling, and so it was really out of partially out of necessity of needing to or wanting to have our own place to sleep so that we could go places, see people outside, but have our own way to sleep, and just to keep the cost of the trip down,
right?
Because we didn't want to book Airbnbs and hotels for 2 weeks. But also I think that we recognized a little bit beforehand, but then during, that it was actually it enabled certain things that we wouldn't have been able to do. Like, for example, we found some like stealth camping right outside of Yosemite National Park.
Nice.
And so we were able to wake up, we were waking up with the sun, which was pretty early. And so we were able to pop right into the park and see the sunrise over Half Dome, I think it was, before everyone else. And if we had booked like a hotel, we would have been many, many miles outside of the entrance. But because we were in the van, we were able to really see it up close. Yeah, that's kind of why we got into it. Did you have a similar experience, kind of trying it out before you jumped in?
I did. For me, the whole reason I got into van life is I owned a business and I was very busy working 6, sometimes 7 days a week for almost 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And near the end, I was really getting burnt out. And so what I would do any time off that I could get, I would like go for walks in the park. I lived in Oregon, so there's a lot of nature in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go for walks in the park and just kind of relax. And I would always do a little bit more and a little bit more. And I worked myself up to the point where I took a couple days off. And similar to you, at the time I had an SUV, and so I just went to Target and I bought like a mattress pad and a cooler and just some snacks. And then I drove out to the mountain for the weekend and just like drove up into the hills, found a parking spot off of a forest road, and just camped out for a couple days. And I just felt so good and so relaxed. And I was just like, man, I want my life to be like this, not like
Yeah.
it was back in the city.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my welcome. And then from there on out, I was just like, how do I make this my reality and, get away from the thing that's causing me the most discomfort?
Yeah. And so how long did it take between that trip and your first van build?
It was Let me think here. It would have been probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
About 6 months of, winding everything down. I actually just sold my half of my business to my partner, my business partner, and sold all my stuff, just kept a few possessions, bought a van, and converted it into a camper. And it's pretty crazy because I did all this,
Wow.
while like my parents and everybody else was telling me I was crazy. And, I didn't even really think about it. I was just doing it. I felt like I was being called, and it just felt right. And so, yeah, I just moved forward.
I think that the U-Haul concept is really appealing, for a couple reasons that we already kind of talked about, which is just being able to stand up. Another one to me is just the stealth nature of it, because a box truck like that, I guess they're certainly less popular than like the Sprinter style van, where I feel like now if you see a tall white work van that doesn't, that has any little feature on it,
Yep.
you can assume that somebody's doing van life and living in there.
Yep.
Whereas I think the box truck, like what you've got, is still a bit less used for that.
I agree. And it's interesting because have this debate with people all the time. I bought it as a white box truck. U-Haul removes all their logos. And then I went ahead and added my own logo to it just so it wasn't a plain box truck.
Mm-hmm.
But the logo is kind of ambiguous. So I think it kind of looks like it could be a business design or something.
Yeah.
And I did cut a couple windows in the side. However, I actually got pulled over for the first time about a week ago by a police officer, actually a state trooper, and he was doing commercial vehicle inspections. So he pulled me over and he's like, "We need to check check what's in the back and all this stuff." And I was like, "What?" And then he explained that they're doing inspections on commercial vehicles, and I was like, "Oh no, this is a RV conversion. I live in here." And he was like, "What?" And he didn't believe me. And he kind of stood back and looked at it. And he was like, "Well, what's the logo on the side? That looks like a business." And he made me open up the back and show him.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like if I had a state trooper fooled, then it's pretty damn stealth.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Can you talk us through the process of building out a van like a U-Haul? Like, for example, what I'm thinking about is like, how do you build walls inside? Do you literally just like frame up some walls and insulate there, or what did you do on the inside to kind of turn it into this home?
Yeah, so the U-Haul platform is definitely the easiest.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for this is it's a complete square inside.
Yeah.
So most of the other vans, they have a lot of contours at the top and the bottom, and so it takes a lot of custom, precision and cuts to build it out. But this one, it's all square, so you can frame it like a regular house.
Mm-hmm.
The additional advantage of the U-Haul is they have wood strips running lengthwise along the walls, and so those come in the U-Haul for like tying down stuff, and you can
Mm-hmm.
run straps to them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did is those wooden rails that run down the length of the van, they stick out about an inch. And so I found that 1 inch rigid foam, like from Home Depot, fits right inside those and it comes out flush. So I just got a bunch of foam panels from Home Depot, cut it into strips, and then lined the walls and the ceiling between these rails. And then I put plywood over it and then my wall finishes.
Got it.
So it was very simple and all the cuts were just, quick, straight cuts. And you could even you could put if you wanted, regular like house cabinets in here, you could hang them just like you would in a house. So for somebody that doesn't want to get too custom, it's definitely simple and it's a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it. And you know, where do you buy a used U-Haul, and how much do they go for?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you can buy them on their website directly, uhaul.com. They actually have a tab for buying vehicles. If you buy it directly from them, they're between ten and $15,000,
Mm-hmm.
which is still a bargain compared to like any kind of Sprinter or Transit or ProMaster that start at 35,000.
Yeah.
But this one I actually bought on Craigslist from a guy that had it that didn't use it, and so I got it for like $5,500.
Wow.
Now this was about 2 years ago, and for some reason the market was soft, and I got a really good deal on it. But I've been watching, and right now the prices they're a lot higher. But definitely watch Craigslist and also Facebook Marketplace.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And as is the case for most things, they're more expensive right now. But I would imagine that the price of U-Hauls has not gone up in the same way that the price of vans has, because they've gone crazy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about the U-Haul is I think it's less desirable. People haven't
Yeah.
really caught onto it yet.
Yeah.
The next biggest platform besides like the sprinters and stuff seems to be like the shuttle buses. I've seen the prices on those go up quite a bit, but the U-Haul is kind of the
Mhm.
final frontier of like vehicles you can convert. I think they're a great choice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Let's face it, most tiny house dwellers want their homes to be small but not uncomfortable. That means reliable, unlimited hot water. Precision Temp's propane fired hot water heaters reliably provide unlimited hot water, and they're specifically designed with tiny homes in mind. In fact, the NSP 550 model was installed in my own tiny home, and the reason I chose it was because it did not require a large hole in the side of my home like other RV hot water heaters. Instead, it mounts discreetly through the floor of the tiny house and works quietly and reliably. Right now, Precision Temp is offering $100 off any unit plus free shipping when you use the coupon code THLP at checkout. So head over to precisiontemp.com and use the coupon code THLP at checkout for $100 off plus free shipping. Thank you so much to Precision Temp for sponsoring our show. So, one feature that I really love, there are a whole bunch of features that I want to ask you about. But actually, sticking on the topic of the U-Haul, I would imagine that U-Haul doesn't like sell these trucks until they're pretty well worn. So I'm curious, how has it been mechanically? Have you had any mechanical issues, and also, what kind of maintenance type things have you had to do?
Yeah. So actually, the great thing about U-Haul is, they have to maintain these things to an impeccable standard because, you can't have, John and Jill Smith moving across the country and the thing breaks down on them. That's
Yeah,
terrible customer service and client experience. So they actually
very
maintain
true.
them very well. And they usually sell them around 100,000 miles because
Okay.
once you get up above 100, you have to start doing some work to them. But
Okay.
so yeah, like if you go to the website, you'll find them around 100,000 miles. But on these vehicles, I mean, they're designed to go a lot more without any issues. And if you look at like Marketplace and some of the online listings, you'll see these things with 300,000 miles on them.
Wow.
So like mine, I've had it 2 years. I bought it with 121,000 miles. It now has 142,000 miles.
Okay.
And I haven't had any breakdowns. And I've spent about $2,000 in just general maintenance. And that's going to a mechanic. I don't really do the work
Right.
myself. So just general like belts and pulleys and hoses. And I had the
Yeah.
shocks replaced, some other suspension work, the alignment. But other than that, nothing major. Knock on wood.
Nice. Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's an appealing platform for sure. How about what kind of gas mileage are you getting?
So that's probably the least attractive part. I only get 9.5 miles per gallon.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can get probably double that on any of the other vans like the Sprinter, ProMaster Transits. They probably get close to double.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, with the initial purchase price being so much less, I mean, I could drive this thing for, 6 or 7 years before I get to, $30,000 in gas. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, a new ProMaster, 30 grand.
yeah. It
It's gonna take a while to get
You just
there.
have to be careful, look at how you view it, the cost. Because a lot of people are like, oh, nine
Yeah.
and a half miles a gallon. I'm like, yeah, but I bought it for $5,500, so it's like, I can
Right.
drive a pretty long ways before I get to that point, and I didn't have to finance it. I don't have monthly payments. My insurance is really, really cheap. I only pay $65 a month for insurance.
Wow.
So, there's benefits.
Yeah, certainly benefits. Um, I love that you decided to kind of keep the cabin area kind of clean, because I think that that really helps with the stealthiness, and that's like a major tell, I think, when you see a work van and you see like a curtain behind the seats, or like
Yeah.
a tapestry,
Yeah.
or clothes drying. You're like, okay, this is a van life van. Whereas you've kind of got, your cabin is totally clean, but you made it so that you don't have to exit your house to drive it away. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's really important for me, especially when you're traveling a lot and you're camping
Mhm.
in unknown places. I mean, usually what I like to do is I drive at night because that's kind of wasted time anyway. You're not outside, you're not doing anything. So instead of just
Yep.
laying in bed reading or on Netflix, I usually drive to my next destination. And then half the time I just drive until I'm tired and then I just pull over somewhere and sleep.
Yep.
So being
Yep.
able to just park and then crawl in the back and not have to get out of the vehicle is nice. And then also, if I need to leave, get up early and leave in a hurry, I can do that, all from inside pretty quick.
Right.
And so for me, I that's a non-compromise. I got to be able to get from my bed to the driver's seat without going outside.
Yeah. And so you found like a short little door to go through.
Yeah, it was just a beautiful gift from the universe. When I was building this thing out, there was a local, like an RV supply place, and they have a bunch of used parts that they pull off of old vehicles.
Yeah.
And this was a used door, and I wouldn't even know where to buy one of these from. I have no idea where it came from or what it's for, but it was literally the perfect dimensions, and so I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. And then you also, you know, you've done a lot of space saving things here. So for example, the your refrigerator, your cooler, your refrigerator cooler lives underneath the counter, but then
Mhm.
when you want to get at it, it slides out on drawer slides and kind of blocks that access into the cabin. But you would obviously never need to be accessing the fridge while you are also trying to walk into the driver's seat.
Correct. Yeah. And the biggest benefit too is you get an additional workspace, prep space.
Right.
So that
Right.
gives me almost 8 feet of countertop. And most of the builds I see with the slide out fridges, they slide forward, but then, you can't leave it out and use the countertop at the same time. So
Mm,
that's why I did the side slide, because you can leave the fridge in the open position and then you can do your whole meal, whatever you want, without having to put the fridge back. So it's
yep.
pretty
Yep.
nice.
Yeah, totally. What did you do about the main entry? There's that question of, am I going to leave the U-Haul kind of roll up door, or am I going to pull that out and like build something else? How did you handle that?
Yeah, so I did quite a bit. When I built this, I'd already been doing van life for a long time. So I did a ton of camping trips as soon as I bought this thing before, with the old roll up door in place.
Uh-huh.
And the problem is that it leaks air. It's not a good seal at all. And so
Yeah.
whatever the outside conditions are, they're coming inside. So it
Yeah.
gets very,
Yeah.
very cold with that rear door. And like when the wind blows, it like pushes the door back and forth and it makes a racket. So what most people have done is they remove the roll up door completely and then they
Hmm.
frame in a completely new rear wall with a door.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I'm always just trying to think about what's the least I can do and the quickest and the cheapest. And so I just left the roll up door. And what I did is I just kind of sealed it. So I sealed all around the edges.
Uh-huh.
And then I put a sheet of plywood over the door to kind of connect all the individual panels.
Okay.
Because the roll up door, it's like a garage door, right? Where it's like a bunch of different sections that
Yep.
that all
Yep.
move independently. So basically, it created a rigid wall and then I just cut out the opening for my regular entry door. So that allowed me
Nice.
to save money on materials. I didn't have to build out a whole new door, and the rear U-Haul door is really solid. It's good quality. So I didn't see any
Hmm.
reason to like cut it all out and throw it away and then spend a bunch of money on new lumber.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I would imagine that if you were in a colder climate, you might, you would be feeling the loss of that insulation on that back wall, but it seems like it hasn't been a problem for you.
Yeah, because of the lifestyle I live, I'm always kind of following the good weather. So,
Yeah.
it gets cold at night sometimes. Like even here,
Hmm.
I'm in Arizona right now, and it gets down to the 30s sometimes at
Yep.
night.
Yep.
But I have a diesel heater that keeps me warm. So, if I was somewhere where it gets into the negatives and it's freezing for a week, that might be a different situation. But
Yeah.
I'm never really in too harsh of climate.
Yeah. Tell me about that diesel heater.
Yeah, I love it. It's the 5 kilowatt diesel heater, and they make the name brand ones that are about $1,000, and this is the cheap one on eBay. I got it for like $150,
Wow.
and I was just concerned honestly because I'm like, there's no way that $150 unit is going to compare to $1,000 unit, and it's like from China, and I'm like, how long is it going to last? But I've been using it for 2 years now and I haven't had any problems with it. It's just been working great. And so my mind has
Nice.
been kind of blown that it's worked so well.
And so this is a little forced air unit. Like it burns diesel, it creates hot air, and it kind of blows it out into your cabin.
Yes, correct. And the benefit about this style is that the intake and exhaust goes outside the vehicle,
Yep.
versus like a lot of propane. Like you can get the buddy heaters or like wave heaters that are ventless propane heaters, but they create condensation
Yeah.
because the burnt propane gas is inside your vehicle. And so
Yeah, those are bad.
this is a completely dry heat.
So when how big of a tank of fuel do you carry, and where is it in the van?
So the diesel heater and the tank is behind the passenger seat.
Okay.
So, my thought on that was when I'm in the living space is when I'm running the heater, I'm not up front in the cab. And so that way I don't have to, because it does make a little bit of noise when it's operating. So I don't have to
Sure.
hear it. And then if I'm filling it up with diesel, I don't have to smell it, that type of stuff. So it is in a separate space.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been fascinated by the cabin heaters, these diesel heaters, just because the technology's been around for a long time, because, trucking has been around for a long time.
Right.
It's always a bummer that or like, wouldn't it be cool if your van was diesel and you could just be pulling fuel out of your fuel tank?
Yes.
But I guess for a number of reasons that I don't fully understand, gasoline doesn't make as good of a heating fuel that as diesel.
Yes, and that's, this is a gasoline vehicle, and I have friends with diesel vehicles, and they've done that. They tap into their gas tank, and then they
Yeah.
have like an
Yep.
endless heat source.
Yep.
But they do not make a gasoline heater, and I don't know why. Some people were saying that the gasoline burns, it's a lot more flammable than diesel,
Mm-hmm.
and so there might be some safety issues with having a gasoline heater. I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure, but there must be a good reason because nobody makes one.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, would it be possible to have essentially put in a fill for your tank from the outside so that you could just like roll up to a diesel gas station and just fill your fuel tank?
Yeah, so you have two options. Like on my vehicle, there's actually a space in the back for a second gas tank. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
wanted, you could actually install like a full size 30-gallon tank and just use that for diesel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually just saw a video on YouTube of a guy that did what you're talking about. He used the 2.5-gallon tank that comes with the heater, but he cut a fill door in the side so he can pull up to a gas station and just fill it
Yep.
manually.
Yep.
The only trick is that it doesn't have an auto shut off like a traditional car gas tank does. So
Ah.
you have to be really careful because you can easily overfill it.
overfill it.
Yep.
Right. It doesn't do that, like the tank just clicks off
Yep.
when it's full kind of
Right.
thing.
It won't do that. So you just have to keep an eye on it. You know, it's not, but it's definitely a nice option.
That's awesome. These diesel heaters are cool. And as somebody who, I have a propane heater, a direct vent propane thing in my tiny house, and it's just nonstop problems for me.
Yeah.
And, something like this is pretty darn appealing, I will say. How small it is, how easy it is to get the fuel, and just, the fact that, and I didn't even know about these ones on eBay, but like, if it breaks and you have to full stop replace the unit, you're out another $100, which, that's usually what it costs just to get someone from a furnace company to show up at your house.
Oh my, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like what I would do if I lived in a tiny house, I would just buy 2 of them. And then that way you would always have spare parts, right?
Yep. Well, very cool. That's a major tip for me. I'm gonna kind of marinate on that a bit and think about maybe retrofitting my tiny house with a diesel heater. So you obviously you live full time in your U-Haul van. How often are you moving?
Usually that's a good question. It depends. Usually I'll go through phases where I'll be in a place for a while. Like, I've been in the state of Arizona for a couple months, but I'm, traveling short distances to different meetups and to visit friends. So it's like short-term traveling. So I'll usually stay somewhere for a few days and then relocate. And then like when the summer comes, if I go back to the Northwest, then I'll be traveling for a couple weeks to get there and, take my time, spend a few days in a spot. So the nice thing is you just kind of go at your own pace.
Yeah.
And, take your time. And when you're done at a place and you're ready to move on, then you just kind of hit the road. So it's really hard as a nomad to make plans, because you just never quite know, what you're going to want to do or what's going to come up and something you might want to go do, so it's definitely a journey.
Yeah. That's really cool. You can just kind of follow your passions, follow your interests wherever they may take you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool. Like, for example, I just went to down here in Arizona. They had Schoolie Palooza about a week and a half ago, which is a huge gathering in the desert. So I was there for like a week. And then after it was done, a bunch of friends were going to go to this hot spring that's about an hour and a half away in California.
Yeah.
And so we caravan down to this hot spring and spent a couple days there just soaking and getting all the dust off of us. And then I was like, man, we're only 2 hours from San Diego, beautiful ocean. And so we were like, hey, let's go to the beach. So then we just drove and spent a few days in San Diego. So it's just it's just like, what do you want to do today? And you can just change your location pretty effortlessly. And, if you would have asked me a week ago before the event, I had no plans of going to San Diego. But, the universe just kind of, leads you to some new options.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. In terms of your work now, you mentioned that you sold your business. So, what do you do from the road to make money?
So I've done a lot of different things. The one thing that's consistent is I haven't had a consistent income, in 4 years. So I've just done odd jobs here and there. I did some photography work, some videography work. I actually landed a gig doing videography for a pretty popular van lifer on YouTube. And so I was able to travel with him for about a year and help film and edit. And that was a perfect job because I was paid to travel and just, be a nomad. So that was pretty sweet.
Awesome.
And so for me, it hasn't been anything consistent. It's just kind of been, the money just always kind of shows up when I need it. But then the flip side of that is that I don't have, a huge cushion, a big savings account or anything.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's one of the big appeals of this lifestyle, where you can afford to have a lot more free time and not have to work all the time in order to afford just your your baseline life.
Yeah, especially now, when you look at trying to rent an apartment and setting up your internet and your gas and your water and your trash and your Netflix and your subscription services and your car insurance, all of a sudden, you're 25, 3 grand a month out of pocket,
Yeah.
and you haven't even bought groceries yet.
Yeah.
So it's like a
Yeah.
lot of people, I feel like, get caught of just working to pay the bills.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I kind of remember doing this exercise when I was like thinking about a tiny house, and I built my tiny house very much because I wanted that same kind of freedom, like less monthly expenses, so that I could, quit my job and try to do my own thing. And like I looked at, 5 days a week for 1 month, and I kind of, on a calendar, I kind of filled in how many days of my work month were going towards different expenses. So like, half of my month was like just rent.
Yep.
And then like another 4 days of work, I don't remember these numbers, I'm making them up. Like 4 days was food, and like 2 days was utilities, and on and on. And I remember realizing that like, of the, let's see, a 5 day a week job, so that's 20 days a month of work, like 1.5 of them was just money that I could use for travel or for recreation or for whatever, or for savings or for whatever I wanted. And I was just like, that is not, when you put it out there that starkly, like I'm working for all these things and only like 1 day a month of my work actually goes towards me.
Right.
So speaking of money, you did share in your video how much, the van cost you to build total. Would you be willing to share that here?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the van was 5,500, and then I estimated, I didn't like keep an Excel spreadsheet of expenses,
Uh-huh.
but I estimate about 5,000, into materials and parts and all that. And that includes like the solar and the batteries and everything.
Yeah. And then how
And
long did the build? Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, and that's, just coming from experience and, being able to do it myself, right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
biggest expense of buying any kind of tiny home is the labor of the people that build it. And then if you're buying it from a company, you're paying the labor of the people that built it, plus you're paying the overhead of the company.
Yeah.
So that's why, they have Sprinter conversions for $200,000. There's not $200,000 worth of wood inside that Sprinter. You're paying
Yeah.
paying for everybody else. So if you can do it yourself, you can get away with it pretty cheap.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have much, construction experience before your first van?
So I did. I worked as a heating and air conditioning technician for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew plumbing and electrical and some construction. So I mean, I did have a pretty good skill set, and I did.
Nice.
The house I was living in before I sold it, I remodeled that house. Like, I laid down 1,500 square feet of flooring and, tore out a wall. So it's like, I was like, if I can remodel a house, I can convert a van.
Yeah.
So I was pretty handy, but I got to say, I've met people, and even some ladies that are like, I didn't even know how to use tools. And, they watched some YouTube videos and they DIY'd it, and it turned out badass. So you don't have to have all the skills right up front. If you don't have the skills, you just have to spend more time on research and on kind of learning those skills, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, one thing that I like to ask all my guests is, what are 2 or 3 resources that kind of helped you or inspired you while you were, planning or building out your vans, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
For sure. The first thing I did was I just watched thousands of YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't watching build videos, but I was watching other van lifers to try to get a sense of, what of the actual experience of living on the road.
Yeah.
And not the glamorous, like I woke up under the sunset, but like, how are you getting water? How much water do you need? Like what's your setup like? How big of a fridge do you have? So I feel
Yeah.
like the internet is so amazing. And so the first thing I would do is I would just watch a bunch of videos and try to figure out, are you going to be part-time or full-time? Do you figure out what systems you need, what style vehicle you need, and and then kind of go down that path. So that was a really good resource for me, was just YouTube. And then I got to say, I already talked about it, but buying vehicles. So you can go to vanlifetrader.com, and that's a
Yep.
great place to get ideas of what's possible, right? You can see a lot of
Yep.
possibilities, different layouts, a lot of finished products. And then, I mean, if you have the money to buy something, you can buy something there. And if you are going to build something, you can just get great ideas of what's possible. So I love Van Life Trader. And then if you're going to try to buy a vehicle yourself for cheap and build it out, then I would go to Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace.
Right. The stuff you find on Van Life Trader is going to be those $100,000 to $200,000 Sprinter vans. You've got to then go build it yourself and save a ton of money.
So, one thing I wanted to do as part of my mission was to kind of be of service to others, and I wanted to help other people get into van life. And so one thing I'm doing is I'm offering some free courses online to help people that want to transition into this lifestyle.
Nice.
And so I have one coming up February 23rd. It's called Discovering Your Dream Home on Wheels.
Okay.
And it's actually going to walk people through the process to try to help them determine, what they would want their experience to look like. Do they plan to be boondocking or staying in national parks or city stealth camping or maybe all of the above?
Yeah.
And then figuring out what systems their van needs. Do they need a shower? Do they need a full bath? How much electricity do they need? How much water storage do they need? So I'm going to be answering a lot of those questions and help people kind of, figure out exactly what they need, so then they can go out and live their best van life. And so if people are interested in that course, they can go to my website, vanliferx.com, and it's free, so they can sign up and hopefully help figure out what's right for them.
That's awesome. And this, I will put a link to that on the show notes page for this episode. And that's awesome. That's really generous. And, just from this interview, I've learned a couple of things from you. And so I'm sure that the class has a lot to offer.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't realize kind of how much I know that other people don't, just because after 4 years, it just kind of becomes habit.
Yep.
And you just assume other people know. But I put out a tip on my Instagram last week about how I deal with my trash.
Yep.
And I had a friend that's been doing van life for about 2.5 years. And she was like, I had no idea about this. I'm so glad you shared it. And I was just like, really? I figured that this is what you were doing the whole time.
Yeah.
And so, there's always something to learn, right?
Totally. Well, Nomad Brad, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. This was such a fun conversation, and I think that there's a lot to learn here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate the time and getting to talk to you and, chat a little bit about van life. I love it. I'm going to keep going as long as I'm able.
Thank you so much to Nomad Brad for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes, including links to Nomad Brad's website, YouTube channel, and more at thetinyhouse.net/200. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/200. Well, that's all for this week. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, proudly sharing the 200th episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast with you. I'll be back next week with another episode. See you then. Hey, it's Ethan. Thanks so much for listening to the show. And if you've made it this far, you must really be a fan. If you enjoy this podcast and are currently planning, buying, or building a tiny house, I'd like to invite you to my private online community called Tiny House Engage, where you get unlimited Q&A, support and accountability from your peers, and multiple weekly live events to connect with fellow tiny housers and get your questions answered. You can learn more at thetinyhouse.net/engage. We've got contractors available to answer your plumbing and electrical questions, and weekly video office hours so you can talk through your tiny house challenges and questions and make solid progress. And if you're a fan of the show, Tiny House Engage members get to watch live while I record the interviews for the Tiny House Lifestyle podcast and ask questions of our guests. It's truly the best way to get advice and support on your tiny house journey, and registration only opens once every 4 to 6 weeks. The doors are closing this coming Tuesday, so head on over to thetinyhouse.net/engage to learn more. Again, registration closes on Tuesday, so visit thetinyhouse.net/engage to learn more.